Beware the YOIs of the world. That is the topic of today's video. My name is Craig Meister. I'm a college admissions coach. You can learn more about me and how you can work with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process on my website, which is collegemeister.com. What is a YOI? Have you ever heard of a YOI before? You may not even know how to spell it. It's an acronym. YOI. YOI. That's what I created this literally just before I went on. What is a YOI? It's a YOI. What is a YOI as it relates to college admissions? A yield-obsessed institution. Beware YOIs. Beware yield-obsessed institutions. Why am I talking about this? What does this mean? What I'm referring to is let's play two very popular institutions against each other right now. University of Michigan and Case Western Reserve University. Very strong in a lot of different majors, both of these institutions. One's private, one's public. One is in Michigan, one is in Ohio. One is relatively large, state school. One is a medium to small size private institution. And there's another big difference between these two. One is a yield-obsessed institution, and the other is not. And so what am I referring to here? Yield is referring to how many of these students accepted actually ultimately matriculate. So colleges are often ranked on their yield, meaning what percentage of those accepted accept the letter of acceptance and ultimately choose to attend. And this is something that some colleges are very protective of their yields. They always want to have a very high or higher yield with every passing year because it shows that they're a popular choice with the students who accept them and they're making smart admissions decisions. And obviously knowing how to calculate one's yield helps a college not over-accept or under-accept because they're going to fill enough rooms, they're going to fill enough majors, they're going to get what they want, and they're not going to fill too many, meaning they're not going to have to put the kids in a hotel, or they're not going to have too few, which means, budget cuts potentially, God forbid, in any given year, depending on how dependent that institution is on tuition dollars for their operating expenses and budget, etc. So yield is important. I'm not denying the importance of yield, but some colleges will go so far when reviewing a student's application to become what, again, I call a yield-obsessed institution, where they look at an applicant and they take into account how likely is this person's profile going to be to sign on the dotted line and ultimately matriculate at our school. And in other institutions, never even contemplate that question. And so here's a great case. Like, this kid applied to Michigan. This happened. This is a real life story. This kid applied to Michigan several years ago, and yes, he was using it as a safety school. He had a 1570 on the SAT. He had an extremely strong GPA, taking all the top courses, beautifully written essays, and he really did like Michigan as a potential safety option. He applied, EA, and was rejected. The only explanation for that at a school, a state school, especially like Michigan, that accepts a certain number of Michigan residents, and also a diversity of other students, most of whom are extremely impressive candidates, but some of whom are not as impressive as others, particularly the Michigan state applicants. But the only reason why someone is like that is not getting into Michigan EA is because Michigan is a yield-obsessed institution. Now, they will never characterize themselves as a yield-obsessed institution. They will never write somewhere on their website that we are a yield-obsessed institution. Of course not. That would be embarrassing. They would never say that out loud. But actions speak louder than words. The only reason to reject someone like that is because you're being protective of yield, and you're basically rejecting him because he's, in your mind, too good for you. You're saying, no, he can't be serious. He's using us as a safety. We're not going to accept him. He's not likely to come because of this. He's probably going to get into 5 programs that are considered more selective for his major or more selective for his ultimate trajectory, and his writing is so amazing. We can't accept him. We're going to reject him because we're yield obsessed. Even though he's objectively stronger than many of the candidates will accept, we're going to reject him because we ultimately, they're not going to say it like this in their minds. They're not going to say it maybe, But implicitly in the back of their mind, they're rejecting him because they don't think he's going to ultimately matriculate. That is where it becomes a yield obsessed institution. It's like, okay, when you have a little anxiety, but when you have a lot of anxiety, it inhibits your ability to go outside of your home. That's when you've crossed the line from, just having low grade anxiety that could be maybe a good thing to having debilitating anxiety that actually is inhibiting your ability to meet your potential. Same thing here. You made the admissions decision, Michigan, in that case, because you weren't just a little concerned about yield. You became obsessed with yield, and you made a horrible decision. In my mind, it's my opinion. You don't have to agree with it. But in my mind, you just rejected an incredibly impressive student who may not ultimately get into stronger colleges. You just dashed his hopes of getting into your safety school. Yeah, it's a safety school. I thought it was a safety school. He thought it was a safety school. It was not a safety school. Because you're yield obsessed. I would call you yield obsessed. Now, you may say you're not yield obsessed, but I would characterize Michigan in that scenario as yield obsessed. Now, I will say that sometimes Michigan in particular, so I don't want to be too hard on Michigan, sometimes Michigan will defer and sort of leave hanging such individuals to see how much they want it later, if they want to fight to get off the deferral for a letter of continuing interest or a wait list later on. And I've seen that happen too. I've seen that happen too with students who do great in Michigan who end up getting deferred and then even waitlisted and then come off the wait list because they fight like heck and they really show Michigan. I don't know if Michigan will characterize it as they demonstrating interest or anything, but ultimately they sometimes will get in. So I at least give props to Michigan in that case, but I do not respect any institution of higher education, higher learning, scholastic excellence that is rejecting students because they're too good for the college, too strong of a student. They'd be too strong or muscular of a mind on campus. That's crazy to me, right? That's when it's become a problem. Your focus on yield is no longer just a business decision. That's something that's considered maybe a little bit, but you're actually making horrible now admissions decisions in my mind in the quest for yield or in the quest to get something else out of particular students matriculating than this incredibly strong student would have also been able to provide. At least, or would have been able to provide what I thought the institution was there for, which was academic excellence, pursuit of knowledge. Are these institutions really that anymore? That's the $64,000 question. Clearly not all of them are, and maybe most of them are not. But then you have a school like Case Western, and I really want to give props to Case Western. Case Western is not a huge school, so it's not like they can accept everyone either. And they're also a private school. And they're tuition dependent institution and they're not funded by the state of Michigan and as Michigan is. And obviously Michigan gets funds obviously from tuition dollars too, and particularly out of state tuition, but other funds of course as well. But Case Western is the opposite. Case is one of, frankly, I would say the increasingly small number of strong institutions in this country that are overtly proud of not being a YOI. Therefore, they're not. They're not a YOI. They are not a yield-obsessed institution. They're not going to reject you because they think you're too good for Case Western or too strong academically or too strong of a student to ultimately choose Case Western. They may reject you for other reasons. They could reject you because, the major is there's only so much space and they cannot fit you any longer. And so you could still be a very strong student and get rejected from Case. They reject quite a few students at Case Western. But they're not going to reject you because they think you have eyes for someone ranked higher on the U.S. News and World Report ranking list. That is not one of the reasons why they're going to reject you. They're not going to reject you because they think you're going to reject them. Okay, but yield-obsessed institutions do that. So the moral of the story is really do your research into colleges and ask. This is a fair question to ask. Put that admissions officer on the spot when they come to your high school, when you visit them, and ask politely, are you a yield-obsessed institution? Oh, well, that's too college meister. Don't even say it like that. Just say, I really like your school, but I'm actually in the top 25th percentile of what you normally accept based off of scores and grades. I love your institution. Is there any possibility that you will consider me less seriously if I'm like in the top 10% objectively of what you normally accept? Like, have that conversation. Ask politely, ask calmly, don't ask accusatorily, but ask and see if they're even prepared to answer that question. I think a lot of the college admissions officers will not even know what to make of you. I think a lot will just defer and say, oh, no, we're looking at the whole package. They'll probably, again, throw out the word holistic. They'll probably throw out the word that we review applications holistically just to shut you up and shut you down. But you may want to dig further and follow up with that person after the full information session and just clarify. You can even say you've heard that some colleges, you don't even have to say this college, you can say some colleges are so focused on yield that they sometimes will make admissions decisions that can actually counterintuitively sort of hurt students who are strongest because they think that maybe some students will choose other colleges over them. Has that ever happened in your admissions review? Just ask sort of like that and see what they say. Some college, again, college like Case Western will overtly tell you that they would never do that because I believe them. I believe the individuals who are running things over at Case Western, at least currently, are not micromanaged to the point where they're going to be so obsessed with yield where they're going to reject someone who they know could be a net positive and a strong asset to their community just because they're too strong and therefore likely potentially to look at a school that like Cornell or, higher ranked program in something that, let's say, the Case is also strong in. But again, Case is a great school, but of course, all these colleges that are not Harvard, Yale, and Princeton will often miss out on students that are strong who they accept because these students may also be accepted by other institutions. But I love a school like Case because isn't it nice and refreshing to think that, like, if you have certain qualifications and you're strong and you make a compelling case on your application that you would be a net positive person on campus, that they're not going to be uber strategic and reject you because of something that, frankly, you have no idea or control over when you're applying, which is what ultimately your college list will look like at that point in the spring, let's say, when you're making all your admissions decisions. Schools that are very obsessed with yield, by and large, are schools that have moved toward early decision, of course, and exclusively early decision, or maybe even ED1 and ED2, as opposed to offering EA, or definitely not rolling. I mean, schools that are obsessed with yield do not do rolling. But yield heavy focused schools usually offer ED. Interestingly, again, in the Michigan example, Michigan does not offer ED. Maybe they will one day. There are some public schools that offer ED still, like UVA, like William and Mary, but the vast majority of public schools offer EA, but that doesn't mean they're not yield obsessed. And again, you could probably put a microphone in front of the director of admission and or the vice president of enrollment at Michigan, and they would probably deny everything I just talked about in this call with you. But the fact of the matter is, they're wrong, and I'm right. And again, this is not taking anything away from Michigan. I like Michigan. I'm talking about Michigan in this context because Michigan's a great school, but strong students should not be weeded out of getting in because someone or multiple people in that admissions office are suspicious that Johnny or Giselle or whoever is applying is going to choose another elite school over Michigan. That should not go into it. If that's going into it, again, that is what I would call, and again, this is just a moniker that I created today in the minute before I started this video. That is what I would call a yield-obsessed institution. So always beware of YOIs, yield-obsessed institutions, because you deserve better in my mind. Now, with that said, I don't say don't go to Michigan. Michigan's a great school, but it's really a shame that this is where we are today in higher education, selective college admissions. Like we want the best, but the best is apparently no longer good enough. Apparently the best, I mean, I could go down a whole rabbit hole. I'm not going to do it. But the best is, I guess it's all depending on where you sit, right? The best is such a subjective term, Craig. So, of course, we have every right to reject someone with a 1590 and an amazing essay and a beautifully argued reason why they want to study within LSA at Michigan. We have every right to do that and accept someone from Michigan who has we don't even know their score because we're test optional into perpetuity now, probably an 1150 SAT. But he or she checks some other box for us that's really important, and we owe it to our state residents. So, we're still a great institution. How dare you question? Well, I have every right. I have every right to question. All right. So again, my name's Craig Meister. You can go to my website, collegemeister.com, if you want to learn more about working with me one-on-one throughout the entire college admissions process. If you like this video and you have no desire to work with me, that's okay. Still give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, and most importantly, stay stress-free throughout the entire college admissions process.